I want to welcome everyone, and this afternoon or this morning, wherever you are. Thank you for being with me. It's a pleasure to be delivering this. Um, I wanted to tell you a little bit about why I chose to talk about a differentiation blueprint this afternoon. It really based on the work that I've been doing with schools and the conversations I've been having with people who work in schools. What I've heard is that a real challenge is being able to stand out from the competition, finding ways to really establish, differences and to differentiate schools. And in addition to that, on the podcasts I've been listening to and articles that I've been reading, it has been clear to me that differentiating as a means of competition is a real priority. And so I thought that, this was something that could be of value. And I hope that this afternoon that I'm able to provide you with some insights and some tools so that you can create a differentiation blueprint in your schools. Um, let me just tell you a little bit about my about me, or let you read a little bit about me here. I you can read this all on your own. The part that's not here is that I came to school marketing after a career in marketing and design, and what I discovered was two things. One is that I love education, and two is that one is I love education, and the second one is that the marketing world of education was a little bit behind what was going on in the business world. So putting those together, I found that I was completely sort of enthralled with the educational process, and wanted to try and really make it better, make it more appealing to people. And so I devoted myself to trying to improve the world of independent school marketing by blogging, by writing, by doing these kinds of presentations, and really sometimes to the point where I forget that really the business that I'm in is in helping schools in doing messaging, marketing, and branding work for schools. The one thing that I would point out here is the very last sentence on this slide, which is that which says that for me, independent schools are both a professional and a personal enterprise. I wanted to wanted to really kind of move ahead and share this image with you because I don't know about you, but when I walk into a grocery store and I see this, I just kind of freeze. And as I gain my composure and take a breath, I pull out my phone and I start calculating the price per ounce, and I look at nutritional information and the ingredients, and then in the end I just buy what I bought last week anyway. But I think that this is a good lesson in differentiation that's not working. And what this points out is that what we're trying to do is really unlike these dairy products. We're trying to establish a memorable presence in really what is becoming a crowded marketplace. And to that end, and talking about the marketplace, I thought that it made sense to share some data that talks about how competitive or the nature of competition in the school marketplace. So let's look at some enrollment trends over the last few years. Um, Public school enrollment has decreased by 2.5% in the last 4 or 5 years, largely probably as a result of the pandemic. It means that there are hundreds of thousands of families who were or are now looking for other educational options for their children. In the same period of time, independent school enrollment went up by 1%, which is good, I suppose. I mean, also as a result of the also as a result of the pandemic. Interestingly, the number of independent schools decreased by 3% in that same period. Obviously some consolidation going on there. In the same period of time, homeschooling went up by 2%. The number of kids being homeschooled has gone up by 2% in that period of time, which is, really quite significant. And interestingly, charter school enrollment has also increased by 2%, and the number of charter schools has actually increased by over 50%. That's really incredible. So I think charter schools, I think we see that, in our communities and from what you read, charter schools are really becoming an option for parents. And the last thing I wanted to talk about are micro schools. I mean, they're growing. There are now, the latest data I saw said that there's now 1.5 million kids being educated in micro schools. I think, we kind of get the sense that the marketplace is crowded and it is changing, and so the need for differentiation is even greater. I wanted to spend a moment and just look at the definition of differentiate, because I think that it is revealing and instructive, actually. So there's two parts to the definition. The first part is kind of what we've been talking about, which is, schools are trying to become distinct or different in character. They're thinking about the ways in which they can present themselves differently. They can, establish their differences. But on the other hand, the second part of this definition, I think, really applies to what parents are doing, which is, they're trying to recognize or give expression to a difference. They're trying to find out, what makes one school different from another. So you've got, at the same time that schools are trying to differentiate themselves, you've got parents that are trying to find out, to figure out differentiation, on their own terms. And really the sweet spot is what kind of when those two things, come together. I also wanted to look at, two different kinds of differentiation. One is vertical differentiation. So vertical differentiation is when you differentiate based on objective terms. Could be price, ingredients, materials, the features that a particular product or service has. And horizontal differentiation is really based on the more subjective factors, how something makes you feel, what emotions, something evokes. And I think that, the reality is that, particularly in schools, that we probably spend too much time on the vertical differentiation and not enough time on horizontal differentiation. We spend a lot of time talking about features, but not enough time talking about benefits and talking about the way in which we offer impacts people emotionally. Many, many years ago, in the very first job that I had, I learned that sales is a transfer of emotion. If you want someone to buy something, you need to make them feel something. And that's true for office products, furniture, and independent school education. So I think that that's an area of differentiation that really requires attention. So I've got 8 strategies for differentiation that I'm going to present to you. Um, and here we go. So the first of them is really the most important, and what I would consider to be the overarching really strategy in terms of differentiation. It's empowering parents. And here's something that I read a couple of months ago that really influenced my thinking on this. It said that it's not your job to convince anyone of your value. As marketers, it is your job to find the ideal customers who already value what you do. What an interesting idea that in terms of school marketing, our job is not to just convince everybody of what we have to value, but it's to accept what we have and then to look for the parents who value that. It's a whole different way, I think, of looking at looking at differentiation. For each of these strategies, I have a checklist for you of things that we're going to be talking about and things that you can do. I think, I thought it might be helpful for you. The first thing is, obviously, if we're going to figure out what parents value, we have to figure out what parents want. Um, and um, and there are many ways to do that. One of the ways is using the jobs to be done framework. It was originally developed by Clay Christensen at Harvard University as a way for businesses to better understand how they can serve their customers. It was adapted by NIAS for schools, and they came up with four jobs to be done by schools. The first of those was overcoming obstacles. And this could mean obstacles in terms of a student's learning needs. It could be obstacles in terms of social emotional issues, whatever they are. Overcoming those obstacles for students and for families is something that parents are looking for and a job to be done. The second was finding a values aligned community. And it's interesting because when I go to schools, the question I often ask people is, what is special to you about this school? What do you like about the school? And the answer that I hear most often is community. And I've come to understand that community is really a kind of shorthand for a like-minded community. It's really what people are saying. And I think that, kind of fits in with this idea of finding a values-aligned community. The third job is developing a well-rounded person. I don't think that requires a lot of explanation, but it is what parents are looking for. And the last one was realizing a plan for a talented child. So, talented is one thing, but you could substitute talent for talented. I think you could substitute any particular learning need, social emotional need, but realizing a plan, an individualized plan for a child is, I think, what that is all about. Another way of figuring out what parents want is through surveys. This is excerpts from a Pew study that was done in 2022. They did a study of parents of children in K to 12 schools. It's actually quite interesting. You might want to look at it. But these kinds of surveys are available. There's also omnibus surveys, surveys, companies that do regular kind of consumer surveying often will in their surveys throw in a question or two about a particular issue. These days that might well relate to education. You can do your own surveys in your own schools, obviously. You can find out what parents are looking for based on what you see on parent review sites, on Facebook pages or Instagram groups for parents, and obviously just by talking to parents, maybe doing your own focus groups about what it is that parents in your school are looking for. So I think lots of ways of doing that. I read about a while ago, I read about this really interesting idea based on an ebook by a guy named Michael Schrage, who's a professor at Harvard. And he wrote an ebook called What Do You Want Your Customers to Become? It was so interesting because the basic proposition was that companies become successful by having an idea of what they want their customers to become and then developing their products to meet that goal. And I thought it was like fascinating. And the image you have here relates to a story that they told, which was that about an executive at Disney that went to a Disney on Ice performance, and he noticed that all of the girls, or many of the girls in the audience, were wearing princess costumes, like you see here, and realized that this idea of princesses was really powerful. That little girls wanted to be princesses, and so they retooled all of their marketing, and they took, sorry, I have to read this list, but they took, Ariel and Belle and Jasmine and Mulan and Pocahontas and Sleeping Beauty and turned it all into their princess line with dolls and clothing and costumes and videos and took what was a $200 million a year part of their business into a $4 billion a year part of their business. And the powerful part to me was I thought about that from the point of view of schools. What is it that we want parents to become? Do we want them to become, obviously want them to become proud parents? We want them to become impassioned ambassadors. We want them to become more knowledgeable. I think if we think about things that way, there are ways of thinking about what we want parents to become, and therefore, what we can offer in order to fuel that, and how we can differentiate our schools. The second strategy I have for you is, thinking about who is your school. Thinking deeply sort of about the identity of your school. What is your school's philosophy? I think the really important in terms of this. And here's the kind of checklist of things that we'll talk about. I wanted to talk about brand, obviously, in terms of this. Your school's brand is clearly a differentiator, and brand is one of those things that is often misunderstood, I think. And here's a great quote from somebody named Seth Godin, who's a professor at NYU, a author, blogger, podcaster when it comes to marketing. And he says that a brand is the set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships that, taken together, account for a consumer's decision to choose one product or service over another. So, what I love about that is that it doesn't talk about the details of a product. It doesn't talk about materials or anything like that, but really it talks about all of those emotional components, what something makes you feel, because I think that's a lot of what branding is all about. Here's another way to think about brand that I thought was really helpful, which is that, if Nike decided to open a line of hotels, a chain of hotels, you might in your mind imagine what those hotels would look like. The big swoosh behind the registration desk, just do it, on all the elevator doors or inside the elevators, what the carpets in the halls might look like. Um, but on the other hand, if Hyatt were to decide to create a line of shoes, I don't think that evokes anything in terms of imagery or what that might look like. And that's probably because, or that is because, Nike is much more powerful brand than Hyatt is. It evokes much more in terms of expectation and kind of feeling. And that's really what brand is all about. Uh, I think that, mission, vision are really important things. I've often thought that mission statements from different schools often sound the same. And I think that the mission is an opportunity to really distinguish your school and to think deeply about what your mission is, not compared to other schools, but in a way that is unique to your school. And the same thing with vision and value statements on schools. By the way, this is from the Madera School, is a girls' high school in McLean, Virginia. Great image that kind of goes with this. But thinking deeply about mission is really I think important to establishing who you are as a school. Another aspect I wanted to talk about was history. This is from the McDonough School in just outside in Owen Mills, just outside Washington, D.C. And the interesting story is that the reason it's called McDonough is because the land that the school is on was bequeathed to them by a guy named John McDonough, who, as it turns out, was a plantation owner, a slave owner, and it's not exactly the best story, but what the school did was they kind of embraced this, and they established this memorial to those enslaved and freed. They've made it part of the experience of the school, actually even part of the curriculum of the school. So they've taken their history, this unique part of history that could be negative, and turned it into a positive, and really made it an important part of, of who they are and what distinguishes them. I wanted to talk about this idea of founder stories. I think it can be really powerful, and this is from the Serendipity School, which is a small progressive school in the Bay Area of California, near San Francisco. And the school was founded by a woman who had a really strong story to tell about it. This idea, as it says, this lifelong dream realized. And she had this idea for starting the school. She knew exactly what she wanted it to be. She even had the name before the school was developed. And I think that reading about this particular founder's story is something that really distinguishes, really differentiates the school. And you may find in your school that if you go back, I found this many times when I've done research into schools. If you look at the founders and why it is that they founded the school, what were the conditions that they were facing, what is it that they were trying to accomplish, you will find things, I think, that are very differentiating in terms of your school. The last thing that I wanted to talk about in with regard to this strategy is this idea of the big why. So this relates to a TED talk done by a guy named Simon Sinek. It's called The Golden Circle. If you've never seen it, use the QR code and have a look at it. It's really powerful. And in a nutshell, what Simon says is that the why of why organizations, services, companies do things, produce things, is really way more important, overwhelmingly more important than the how and the what. And it really relates to schools because so often when we talk about schools, we talk about the what and the how we do it. But do we really understand the why? Why is it that our school exists? What would be missing in our community if our school didn't exist? And it's a really powerful way of thinking about what you do, and what differentiates your school. So, in terms of the third strategy, I wanted to begin thinking about how you compete because to this point, all the things that we've been talking about are sort of internal. They're ways of defining, who you are, what you are as a school, but they don't take into consideration yet the fact that you operate in this marketplace. So you need to begin thinking about how you're going to differentiate in a competitive landscape. And I have two ideas for you in terms of how to do this. The first is, a little bit simplistic, but I think it's it works really well, and it's a good way of being able to organize thought. So, and it goes like this. Start with thinking about the things that your school does best. What are the things that you do best? What are the things that you do really well? And then think about the same idea in terms of your competitive schools. What are the things that, whether, by the way, whether this is in terms of programs, whether this is in terms of, it could be anything, the nature of your offerings, it could be the experience of your school. What are the best things about your school? What are the best things about the competitive schools? And then add into the mix, what is it that parents want? Now, you might ascertain that based on some of what we talked about earlier, various surveys that you've done, other people done, your conversations with parents. But what is it that parents want? And then the interesting thing is to then take this area, that purple lined area, because that now becomes what you do best, what that your competitors don't do best, and is what parents want. And that could be the greatest area of differentiation. So there's an interesting way of thinking about, how your school is differentiated in a competitive landscape. Here's another way of doing it. This is a real marketing kind of premise. It's called the positioning statement. And it's a way of organizing your thinking. It's meant to be this is an internal tool. This is not something that you would use in terms of your marketing language, but it's a way of organizing your thoughts. So for a particular target segment, brand name, that's going to be the name of your school, is the frame of reference. You might say, well, that's obviously a school. But I would say that, if you think about this in terms of the earlier slide and what's going on in the educational landscape, it could be school, it could be, educational option, because when you're comparing it to homeschooling and other types of education, that delivers a particular defining or benefit or point of difference, something that your school does really, really well. Because how do I know it does that really well? How can I tell you it does that really well? Because only I'm going to, obviously the name of the school, but now I'm going to give you the reason to believe that we do that really well. I'm going to give you the proof point that goes with that. So let's put this into practice so you get an idea of how this works. For a target segment, for students who require more individual attention, there's our target segment. K-12 is the name of our school. Provides, I didn't in this case use the frame of reference, but provides the environment that will help them succeed. That's our point of difference, is that we have an environment that helps students require more individual attention succeed. How do we know that? What's the proof point? Because we offer the smallest class sizes. And you can see that you could repeat this for various target segments that you appeal to, and using different benefit points and different proof points, and you would end up with really an inventory of positioning statements that you can then use to create points of differentiation and really ultimately create messaging points down the road. The fourth strategy that I wanted to talk to you about is, how do you do school? How does your school operate? What are the things that sort of define the way things work at your school? And beyond, I'll talk about culture in a minute, but this could involve the educational philosophy of the school. Uh, what the internal communication. How is it that you communicate both to parents, to employees, to other stakeholders in the school? Are there a particular style to that? Is there language that you use on a regular basis in terms of talking about the school? And often how you do school could reveal itself as well in the faculty, the teachers that you hire. I mean, beyond their qualifications, usually schools end up hiring teachers that have sort of common characteristics, things that they value, that are in line with the school's value. And so, how you do school, is often revealed in the very nature of faculty. And the last thing is, obviously in terms of the curriculum, in terms of teaching methods, has a lot to do with, how you do school. I have a good example here of culture. Culture is really about the rituals, the artifacts, I'd say the behaviors, the vocabulary. I talked about lexicon before that you would find in a school. And this is from the Kent Place School in Summit, New Jersey. It's a girls PK to 12 school. And this is their view book. And I thought it was really interesting because if you look at the words that are on this on that you see in front of you, I think it reveals something about culture. It gives you an idea, both in terms of the image, but particularly in terms of the language, in terms of what differentiates this school. The fifth strategy is what do you offer? What exactly is it that you offer? And I think you can go through the whole list of whatever it's programs, resources, facilities, all of the things that you offer. But I think the important thing is to think about this in detail, because when you think about it in a lot of detail, you may find that there are details of what you offer that you take for granted, but that end up being really meaningful to parents. And I think you can see that happening a lot. The little small item that's part of whatever it is, a program that you offer, is something that is very, very significant to a parent. And it relates to the second point here, which is that your ordinary, what you think is ordinary, might be somebody else's extraordinary. So thinking in great detail about what it is that you offer and being able to present that is really important in terms of differentiation. The second thing that I wanted to talk about here is experience. I can tell you from research that I've done, from books that I've written, that the parent experience could be the most important, the key determinant in a parent's decision to enroll or re-enroll a child in a school. And the parent experience is really the amalgam of all of the touch points and interactions they have in a school, everything from, the front desk to meetings with educators to the business office, kitchen staff, custodial staff, all of those things add to a parent's experience in the school. And every one of those touch points has an impact. There are people that say there's no such thing as a neutral touch point. Every one of those touch points will either accentuate the parent's experience or will, in some way, reduce the value of the parent experience. And here's the interesting thing, beyond the parent experience sort of being positive, validating, you want the parent experience at your school to be unique because your values, you're different than the school down the road. And so in that way, your parent experience becomes another way of being able to differentiate what it is that you offer to parents. In terms of what you offer to parents, obviously tuition is a key issue. In fact, I can tell you that the most visited pages on a school website are the homepage and the tuition page. It makes sense. People want to know what they have to pay. And I think that the messaging, what we say about that is obviously, really, really important and really an opportunity to differentiate. This is from, Hebron Academy, which is a upper and middle school, boarding school in Hebron, Maine. And I thought that this idea of, think you can't afford it, think again, was a really intriguing way of, compelling way of being able to talk about financial assistance. Best practice, by the way, on many tuition pages, because people are making a decision as they come to the page, is not just to present the cost, but to present the value. So, I think that you'll see more and more that schools on their tuition pages have testimonials, a video, some way of establishing the value of what they offer at the same time that they value, that they present the cost. And that value is, again, another way of being able to differentiate. And obviously, what your school, what tuition is at your school, differentiates it as well. But the way in which you present it, I think, could be even more important. The Oh, hi, Katie. Um, hmm, you had a question, and I'm not sure how to get to it. So can we do it after? Um, and one other raised hands. Okay. I need to apologize. Um, oh, Katie, do you want to ask your question? Okay, I'm going to go on. I apologize. So going on, the sixth strategy that I have for you is how you communicate. And there's lots of things involved in this. The first one I wanted to talk about here is messaging, because messaging really involves messaging is all of the copy on every on in all of your collateral on your websites and your view books and your recruitment material and what you say to parents. All of that, is messaging. Messaging involves as well images, videos that are part of that are part of what you present. And embedded in that is everything that your school values and is important to you. And I wanted to give you this example. This is from Stewart Country Day. It's a girls' school in New Jersey, and I thought this was a great example of both how images and copy working together create messaging that really make a statement about a school. The other things that I wanted to talk about are here are thought leadership is this idea of you can establish that your school is a thought leader in a particular area, whether that could be some aspect of education, maybe it's athletics, maybe it has something to do with after school programming, whatever it is, something that you're doing that is really ahead of what other schools are doing, then that's another way I think of being able to communicate that in a way that differentiates. Design was something that I wanted to talk about too, because I think that sometimes we take it for granted. And this is from the Fredericksburg Academy in Fredericksburg, Virginia. It's a pre-K to 12 school, and this is their welcome package to new families. And I thought it was just a great example of how you can take something that, might be kind of ordinary and through design, just turn it into something that's extraordinary. And, you can see the design on the inside, the eagle, that's part of their, not really their mascot, but it's really part of their branding, if you will. And so much thought was put into this, and it has so much impact, when parents get this and open it up. So I think it really speaks to the potential impact of design. And obviously, I talked about websites, but I think the thing about websites is it's more than design, because so many websites look similar these days. By the way, this is from Metairie Park Country Day in just outside New Orleans. It's a PK through 12 school. Um, when I work with a school on their website, the first question that I often ask them is, what is it that what do you consider to be a successful visit to your website? What do you want parents to do? Do you want them to fill out an inquiry form? Do you want them to apply? Do you want them to register for a tour? Are there sections of the website that you want them to read? Because whatever it is you want them to do, we need to design a website so that that's going to happen. And so the user experience is a really important part of websites and differentiation, because that's gonna get people where you want them to go. And so I use this example because they have the inquire, the visit, the apply button, the explore button. So all of the things are there in terms of parents being able to find their way to where they want to go, and be able to then find how this particular school is differentiated. The seventh thing I wanted to talk, the seventh strategy is about, how do you lead? It's kind of similar to this idea of thought leadership, but this is really more lead in terms of, I think, in terms of substance, in terms of the school itself. The image that you see here is from Branksome Hall, Asia. Branksome Hall, Asia is the sister school to Branksome Hall, which is a K to 12 boarding school in Toronto, here where I am. I should have mentioned that before. I'm in Toronto, in Canada. And many years ago, they were one of the very first schools to establish an overseas sister school, which they established in this island. I forget the name of it, just off the coast of South Korea. And they do exchange programs, between the international students they have at the Asian school and the schools from Toronto. And this idea of having an overseas sister school has been copied numerous times since then, but really was a way of establishing themselves as a leader. Another example that I wanted to talk about, here's your checklist, by the way, be first, that I'm talking, be a leader, is the Mount Vernon School in Atlanta. Here's a school that 20 years ago, it's a PK to 12 school, 20 years ago was floundering. Really, was in a really bad spot. Leadership at the time had to make a decision about how to go forward. It was either going to be to do something dramatic and invest in the school, or to really close down. And they made this huge commitment to be total innovators, to make this commitment to be a leader in education, and it worked. 20 years later, Mount Vernon is regarded as a complete leader in innovative educational processes, in progressive education. And what's really fascinating, I think, about this is they then took that and they established Mount Vernon Ventures. So they took all they learned and everything that they did, and they packaged it into an R&D company, into this consulting company that uh, tells schools, businesses, how they can transform, used everything that they learned in order to, in order to then be able to spread that word, be able um, create this Mount Vernon Ventures. And by the way, this makes money that then fuels the school. In addition to that, and in addition to completely differentiating Mount Vernon, when you think about Mount Vernon, I think you think about innovation. Con Lab School was one of the very first lab schools in the country. Really, I think established, the lab school principle based obviously on the work of Saul Kahn, the Khan Academy, his thinking in terms of education. One of the first schools to really establish this idea of mastery-based, completely progressive lab school environment, and obviously differentiates themselves as a leader in that. They have people coming there all the time, people from other schools to learn about lab schools, how they're doing things. And so, here's a school that is really well differentiated based on being a leader. And I also wanted to talk about the Winchester Thurston School. This is I find this to be really interesting. This is a pre-K or K-12 school in Pittsburgh. And it's an older school. It's right in the downtown core of Pittsburgh. And they really found themselves in a very interesting position, which was they were completely surrounded by buildings. They had no room to expand. If they wanted to try and grow the school, there was nowhere for them to be able to do that. So they came up with this great idea, which is the idea of using the city as a campus. And what they did was that they enlisted museums, studios, all kinds of interesting creative art spaces in and around the school, and had students go there and do their learning in those spaces. And so, the kids get this wonderfully varied experience. They're using the area around them so creatively. And this idea of city as a campus was copied after that. But I think Winchester Thurston was a leader in terms of that, and differentiated themselves, frankly, by doing that. The eighth strategy I have for you is, what are the outcomes? And I think that some of this is kind of obvious, but you can talk about this in terms of a portrait of a graduate, which I have here. And really, I think portrait of a graduate is a powerful way of talking about outcomes, because if it's done right, the portrait of a graduate really blends all of the educational goals with the end product. It takes the end product and says, how do we create that? So it's powerful thinking for schools, but it definitely demonstrates what the outcomes of an education at your school is. Obviously, the matriculation results, high schools, colleges that kids end up at, alumni success stories, testimonials. These are all ways in which you can, differentiate your school based on the outcomes that you provide. I wanted to take a minute and talk about this idea of why differentiate. And so, you might find this a little bit odd coming toward the end of this presentation. And now I'm talking about it. But the point is that differentiation, I mean, to this point, really, we've been talking about differentiation in terms of enrollment or in terms of um, um, uh, recruitment and retention, sorry. But differentiation really has broader benefits than that. It has benefits in terms of retention, obviously, fundraising. It has, tremendous benefits. I think it has benefits in terms of, talked about this a little bit earlier, hiring faculty. Not only do you want to hire faculty that have great qualifications, you want to hire faculty that will fit in with your school. And so the degree to which you differentiate makes it easier to kind of make that match. Supplier relationships, you want to do business with the kinds of companies that are aligned with your values. It could have impact in terms of things like grant applications. Being able to differentiate your school could make a difference there. And the final thing is this. I think differentiation ultimately can be the North Star for a school. It can totally impact decision making in a school. Because if you know what your differentiation is, if you know how you're trying to differentiate your school, then you have a basis for making every decision in the school. And by the way, that's not just marketing and communication decisions, those are educational decisions as well. Because all of those decisions should fuel that ongoing process of differentiation. So it's differentiation is a very powerful way of I think of looking at schools. Anyway, I think that to this point, I presented a lot of material. I hope you think that there's a lot of content that's been that I've been provided. I find it's often helpful to, help people with the kind of low-hanging fruit and the things that you can do next, the things that you can do next week with this. So, here's a kind of short list of things I think that you could do. One is, you could determine or think about what's important to your parents. What is it that parents, either your parents in your community, what's important to them? What are they looking for? What are the things that they value? And then, what are the value matches? What are the ways in which what you offer matches up with either, like I said, either your parents or what you know about parents in your community and your catchment area? You can look deeply into your school and its identity and its big why. Share that big why video, that TED Talk with people, and you could even get people together to talk about it because I can tell you that it can be really, really powerful when you start thinking about that, and as big step toward differentiation. I think one of the things you can do is assess the competition realistically and be able to think about how you fit in. Those were that triple Venn diagram idea, that idea of how does what you offer fit in what your competitive schools offer, and therefore how do you differentiate? And a piece of advice would be to start small. Do one piece at a time. Like, maybe take I don't know, take the tuition page of your website and say, okay, how can we make that differentiate better? Take a recruitment email that you're sending out. Maybe something like a view book, but do it one piece at a time because thinking about this, in terms of everything all at once is going to be very difficult. And apropos to that, it has to be a team effort. You're not going to be able to do this yourself. You need to do this with others in the school. And I would say that, you need the involvement of educational leaders, you need the involvement of your marketing, you need the admissions and enrollment people, and vice versa. Your enrollment, you need the marketing people. There's clearly this idea of establishing what differentiates your school and then communicating it, is something that you cannot possibly do alone. And then finally, by all means, this is something that, I love to talk about. I am passionate about school marketing and working with schools. I can see some of the people, on the call are people that, I have lots of contact with, so you know that that's true. If you're working on differentiation and you're looking for help, that's by all means. And by the way, one of the things I forgot to mention earlier is that if you're interested, I have an ebook called Mastering Messaging for Schools. Be happy to send you a copy. Just either in the chat, or you have my information. Just send me an email, and I will happily send you that, along with any branding resources, parent experience resources I can get you. Anyway, I mean that's what I have for you. I am going to stop sharing, and if we have opportunity for some questions or comments, that would be great.